pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Dale Cole, a physician by trade and a co-founder and visionary for NeuroWorks outpatient clinic in South Jordan. And NeuroWorks provides care for individuals with traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries, and they do a fantastic job. Now, the reason why I was asked to introduce him is because he's actually my uncle. So, yeah, he was my mom's younger brother, and all growing up, my mom used to tell us, and I think she just had jealousy, but she'd always say, Dale got all the looks, Dale got all the smart, Dale got all the personality, Dale got all the money, Dale got on and on and on. I thought for a while my mom was just kind of crazy, which she kind of is, but still, to the point, I thought she was a little bit crazy until I realized she actually understated the situation, and he's really much better than that in every area. And he's a hard person to introduce. The reason for that is because the story is quite amazing, and if I guess if I tell too much, I feel like it pulls some of the power out of his presentation. So I'm actually going to not go down that road right now, but I do want to tell just one quick story. So after Dale's accident in 2002, Eddie and I were getting our MBA together at school, and Dale called us, and it was almost just perfect timing. In fact, I thought it was a glorious accident until I realized I don't think there's a lot of accidents in life. I think it was meant to be, but he asked us to work on a business plan for him, and we happened to need that for school as well. So Eddie and I kind of had split motives because on one hand we wanted to get a great grade, fulfill a requirement, and move on, but we also wanted to give him a meaningful business plan so that he could start his business. And so, lest you think I'm breaking my arm, patting myself on the back, I will tell you that as I look back on that, I think I could give Eddie and I, an A for effort. But I really look at that business plan, I would probably give it a D+ right now. And the reason for that is I think a lot of the core critical success factors, I think we hit. I think they were probably pretty accurate, but we missed the whole point of NeuroWorks. We never accounted for the power of the human spirit. We never accounted for what happens when somebody has hope. We never accounted for what happens when somebody finally makes the choice that they're going to be better and do more. We really never accounted for the fact that when someone is really up in life and they fall to great depths, that what they can become when they rise again. And to me, that is the difference in NeuroWorks. So everything that we had in that business plan really, I think, is irrelevant. We just miss the spirit, I guess the human spirit. So with that, Dale got his medical degree from the University of Utah. But I'm even more proud that last year he went back to BYU and got his master's in public administration. So that's done very well. So I'm excited to turn the time over to a fellow Cougar, a physician, my uncle, and probably one of the best guys I know, Dale Cole.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Dustin. That was very, very kind. It does remind me, his story about the business plan reminds me of General Patton's quote that when he said, "A poorly designed plan fiercely executed today is much better than a carefully designed plan executed tomorrow." So we have a lot of fond feelings for Dustin and Eddie because their business plan actually was fiercely executed, and it's served us well. So we appreciate it very much. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I know that some of you have come from out of state, is that correct? From the western states, right? So, and your theme has something to do with the Force and Star Wars. So I'm just curious, is there anybody in here who has not seen Star Wars? At least the original one? Okay.
And Opal, we're sticking together.
All right. So the reason I ask that is that my business partner, the co-founder of NeuroWorks, has never seen Star Wars, and so you join her and Matt Lauer as two more people who in the U.S. So there must be at least 5 of you now that have never seen Star Wars. So hang in there. So I have made my partner watch Tommy Boy, however, and she does not seem to. So, well, I've been invited here to share with you a little bit of a story. It's my personal story. And like I heard a gentleman say the other day, believe it or not, my life's based on a true story. I think he was a politician who said that. But before I get started, I need to catch you up just a little bit about me today. So 15 years ago, I broke my neck on my So as you see me today, and I walked up here with a cane, you're probably saying, well, you look pretty darn good today, which I do. So I'm still considered a quadriplegic. I'm euphemistic moronic statement if you've never met someone who's a lies from my mid-chest down and partially numb from my mid-chest down, particularly my hands and my feet. Feeling which is there. So as I'm standing here in front of you, I feel like I'm sort of Christmas lights blinking all the time. And the other interesting thing is that my hands are partially numb. So even though I can rub my hand across the surface of this desk, I can feel the texture. But if I'm holding something in my hand, it very quickly kind of disappears and I'll drop it. It's that sensory fatigue sets in really quickly. Walking is a very conscious act for me. I have to think about the mechanics of walking all the time. Otherwise, I start to trip and fall. And in anybody who has a spinal cord injury, the one thing that you'll appreciate is it's not all about walking. There are things in life that you lose that easily. Nevertheless, that's part of the whole story. So what I want to share with you today is what's sort of happened over and it's amazing how much I have learned in the process of rehab. And what was interesting about my rehab is I kept making progress. And my physical therapist would say to me, aren't you happy with the progress? Thank you. With the progress that you've made. And I was so concerned that if I said yes, it would stop. I don't know why. Well, I am very pleased, but I'm not satisfied, which allowed me to for a long ways. Journey with paralysis. It has everything. Miracles, love, adventure. My story has similar things. So I'd like to begin back in 1999. I'm a practicing delivered probably thousands of but it's been long enough now that I wouldn't be surprised if somebody doesn't walk up someday. It was a huge privilege to be part of people's families. It was an amazing experience for me to this was an amazing group of healthcare providers, very collegial, very hardworking, very bright, very conscientious physicians, and that I've learned is be a little careful when things are going really, really good. So you never know what's going to pop up next. At home, I had a very supportive, loving wife. And this picture was actually taken on our now non-existent trampoline, because as I mentioned, this is where my accident happened. The practice of medicine can be very seductive. There's always one more person to take care of, one more person to see. And as you all know, you always get that person who says, "You can't go on vacation, you have to deliver my baby." So on a very beautiful July summer evening, I came home from work a little bit later, and everyone had already kind of gone their own way. I had a quick dinner, and I went out to jump. I grew up when there were trampoline parks in the United States, and you paid money to go in and jump for a certain period of time. And so when those trampoline parks went away, with some forward momentum. So he had a spinal cord injury at the very highest level you can get. And I thought to myself, man, if I'm not successful, I can have the same thing in reverse. So I discounted that and just tried to twist and throw my leg over to try and change my position as best I can. Unfortunately, I did run out of hang time. So I landed on the trampoline. I didn't fly off the trampoline, I landed on the mat. But landed in such a way that very quickly, I heard and felt a pop, and everything went completely numb, just like throwing a switch. And I have a very distinct image of me looking up at my body with my arm across my waist, the sunlight coming across, and that was it. And I knew what had happened. I bounced on the trampoline and came to rest face down on the trampoline. And fortunately, there was part of my trampoline where the springs had fallen out. You know, if they weather, they weaken, and sometimes the springs fall out. So the one particular section had the springs that had fallen out. I came to rest with my head perfectly in that opening, as if I was laying on the trampoline looking under the mat. That was my first blessing that I know of. Because really, if you think about it, my head was now in a perfectly neutral position. Had I not come to rest in that position, I would have turned my head right, left, up, or down, and probably sustained more damage. So as I laid there, I knew exactly what had happened. I knew the physician who was going to take care of me at the University of Utah. I knew there was going to be the show and tell for the second-year medical students that I had had when I was a student. I was going to be a quadriplegic, and my life really was done. I wasn't going to be a husband, a father, a physician, like I knew it before. That was it. That was over with. And here's one of the lessons that I probably have learned is, it's no secret that we're all going to have adversity and problems. I mean, we know that's going to happen. The big challenge is going to be that the adversity that you're going to have to face is probably not on your list. Because becoming a quadriplegic, not on my list. Never even thought about it, never even dreamed about it. And the first words out of my mouth were, "Oh God, no, not this." And it wasn't because of what had happened, it's because I had no idea what to do. As my father-in-law is fond of saying, I felt like a mosquito in a news column. I had no idea where to begin. That was probably the most difficult aspect of the whole thing for me, was I don't even know what to do. I don't know where to start. Well, my wife found me after about 10 minutes, and then the EMS people obviously did a great job of getting me off the trampoline. They took me to my local hospital. My colleagues there examined me, and yes, they really quickly surmised that I had a very serious injury. I had no motor, no sensory function. Oops. And then they did take an X-ray. Might as well just put it over there. As long as we didn't do anything damage to the electrical stuff or I don't know whose it is. Dustin will pay the bill for that. So what the X-rays showed is that I had successfully dislocated the C5 over C4, and it remained locked. So essentially, my spinal cord is taking two 90-degree turns, and that had a very poor prognosis. And pretty much, I knew that I would be spending the majority of my days in a power wheelchair, probably with a sip and puff tube to drive the chair. It was pretty obvious. Well, I was then taken to the University of Utah Hospital where I met the neurosurgeons, and they did a great job of stabilizing me, and I went through the neuro ICU, and I ended up in rehab. This is a picture of the... Now, rehab is unlike any other place that you know about, and some of you already know that, but here's why, and I hadn't thought about it before. But most of us go to the hospital with the idea that you're going to get better. And even if you die, you're getting better, right? You're being transferred to the ECU, the Eternal Care Unit. But if you end up in rehab, the reason you're in rehab is because you've had a spinal cord injury, a traumatic brain injury, a stroke, multiple trauma. You're not going to get better. You're going to get different. And getting different is something that no one's ever taught you how to deal with. And that became the huge challenge for me, is how do you get different? Now, I do want to point out to you from this picture, if any of you ever find yourself in the hospital, you can stay very attractive by showing lots of leg and a little bit of shoulder. So the biggest thing for me was the loss of independence. So before my accident, I would describe myself as malignantly independent. I'm a physician, I don't need help, I can take care of myself. And to go from malignantly independent to totally dependent in a fraction of a second was overwhelmingly difficult. So everything you can think of that you need to have done for you, and then all the things you don't want to think about, they have to be done for you. That is really difficult. I mean, I understood the medical aspect of it, but if you want something strange, go home tonight and have someone else brush your teeth for you. It's just weird. I mean, it's not right. But you have to have all those things done for you. And it's not so much being a patient in the hospital. You know what's hard? Is subordinating yourself to other human beings. I mean, you are totally subordinated to them. That's really tough. So, here's another little tip for you, especially you men. If you ever find yourself out in public and you have thigh-high white hose on and a urine bag, You wear dark glasses so no one will recognize you. One of the things I really appreciated are those professional caregivers who were incredibly kind and proficient with their care. I'm amazed that there are people who are so good at what they do. And the interesting thing about my situation was the only place I really had feeling left, sensory, was my face. And it was interesting because I could tell you by how someone washed my face if they were just doing their job or if they really cared. I mean, it was very plain as day. It's like, yep, that person just doing their job. No, that person really cares. Very easy to tell. Now, do you really think it's fair to make rabbit ears behind someone who's totally paralyzed? I don't. So, there are a few things that I can criticize. So, this is me in my sip and puff tube bed in rehab. So you can see the little white straw that's coming down to my mouth. I was able to raise the head of the bed, change the channel, called the nurse. And I pretty much knew this was going to be it for me. And I said to my wife, I will do anything. I will work as hard as I can to have one arm just to drive the joystick of a power wheelchair. That was my only goal. I was never one of those people who said, oh, I'm going to walk out of the hospital. I mean, I knew how bad the injury was. So to me, if I could just have one arm, at least I could drive and talk at the same time, right? That would be good. That was my only goal. Now, one of the other things that happens when you're totally paralyzed, which I never even considered, is that you have no idea where your limbs are in space. Have you ever had your arm go to sleep so bad that when you wake up, you actually have to move it? And you don't know where it is? Well, think about your entire body like that. It was really, really disconcerting. So the occupational therapist decided they would help me with that. So you can see in this picture, what they've done is they put a full-length mirror up on the trapeze bar of the bed so that I could look up in the mirror and see where my arms and legs were. And that's fine, that helped. Now, here's the weird thing, is right in the middle of the deepest tragedy, sometimes humor bubbles up. So you can imagine, nighttime for me was really hard, because that's when everybody would go home. Now it's when I would do all my crying and all my praying and all my, regret, right? Because you're by yourself, it's dark. And so I'm laying there one night, it's like 3 a.m. I mean, I'm just miserable. I'm looking up at this mirror, and the funniest thought pops into my head. Because I say to myself, I finally have a full-length mirror above my bed and I'm totally paralyzed. It's like, dang! So it is one of the few times that I actually laughed out loud. So. Now, you can't go through something like this without a supportive spouse or significant other. And I'm here to tell you that I will be forever grateful to my wife because I credit her faith with a lot of my, or most of my recovery, if not all of it. She's a non-medical person who got thrown into a really critical, catastrophic medical situation, who had to start making decisions for me, who had to understand things that were totally just overwhelming. And she hung in there. Because it would be very easy for someone to say, I didn't sign up for this aspect of the whole deal. I mean, that would be easy. And I wouldn't blame someone for doing that, because this is really hard. I mean, this didn't happen to me, it happened to her, happened to her whole family. I mean, the ripples go out really fairly broad. And so I will be eternally grateful for that. Now, one of the things that she did do was that she wallpapered my hospital room with all the cards and letters that people sent me. And that's what you see there. So I consider myself extremely fortunate because I've attended my own eulogy. Because people wrote things in those cards and letters that you only hear when you die. Really? So here's one little suggestion for you. If you have somebody that you really love, appreciate, and you respect, write them a note right now or send them a text Don't wait until they're in the casket. You know, if you're going to put anything in the casket, it's the money you owe them as a check, right? Wink, wink. You're going to have to think about that one, right? But really, it makes a huge difference. And I've kept all those because they are worth more than money to me in terms of what people have said. Now, I need to tell you something really quickly that is really important to me. And again, it's about my wife's faith. So as you can imagine, as this happened, we were inundated by people wanting to help. And we had people praying all over the place. I had Catholics lighting candles. My name was in every temple, LDS temple. I had an entire Baptist congregation in Oklahoma who devoted their prayer service to me. It was amazing. It was amazing to me. And whether or not you believe in God or even a higher power, the one thing that I will tell you unquestionably is that there's a power in the human spirit that when collectively focused on any particular objective or goal is a force to be reckoned with. There is no question in my mind. And I'm the beneficiary of that. And I mean, I'll never be able to thank all the people that were involved with that. So let me tell you some specifics. So, again, you got to remember I'm totally paralyzed. I have no motor, no sensory function. And about 2 weeks into my accident, I started to get light touch all over my body, which was a really good thing because it means that signals are going this way, up the spinal cord, right? Because I can perceive light touch. So I'm thinking to myself, that's good. So if I just lay in bed and send the signals the other way, hopefully nature will find a way and maybe they'll get through. So I would lay in my bed and just send the signals over and over and over again, hoping that somehow they would get through. Well, in the meantime, my wife was getting people who wanted to, do more for us. And so she eventually said, well, let's organize a specific prayer day where everybody can focus on this particular prayer. People who want to fast, they can fast. So they did. And so it wasn't long after, probably in the third week, about this particular prayer day. Well, about 48 hours prior to this time, I was pretty convinced that my right big toe could move. Now let me give you a quick physiology lesson. When you have a spinal cord injury, the rule of thumb is that if you're really fortunate, you may recover 2 levels below your injury, going down. So I'm a C4, C5. So I may be fortunate if I get a C6, C7 recovery, which means I may get biceps. Really lucky if I get triceps. If I get triceps, that's huge because then you can transfer. Okay? So to think that my right big toe could move was pretty weird. In fact, I would have nurses come in the room and I'd say, can you see my toe move? And they would have this look on their face like, he has a brain injury too, doesn't he? Because you just don't recover that way. So this fast day, this prayer day happened, and it was in the evening of that day. It was about 7 o'clock at night. My wife was in the room, and I was so convinced that my right big toe could move. I said, Renee, go get one of those big long Q-tips. I'm going to have you put it between my toes, so it's a lever arm, so you can exaggerate any movement. So I'm kind of sitting up in bed, and she walks around the end of my bed to go get this Q-tip to humor me. And as she walks around the end of my bed, I look down and I see my feet go like that. And I think to myself, geez, now I'm hallucinating because it just looked like my feet moved. And I tried it again, and sure enough, I moved my feet. I said, forget the Q-tip, watch this. And she stopped me, she said, how are you doing that? And I said, I don't know, how do you do it? I just did it. And within about 30 minutes, I could twitch my calf muscles and my thigh muscles and move my feet. That was on that prayer day. Now that was the good news. So the next morning my doctor comes in. You know how doctors are, good news, bad news. So I show him my legs. He said, well, that's good. How are your arms? My arms are still inanimate objects, nothing. He said, well, the bad news is you don't have arms, you don't have legs. We call that a central cord syndrome. You've preferentially damaged your spinal cord so you'll have legs, but you'll never have arms or hands. Have a nice day. So my wife comes in and I said, I'm really ticked. She's like, why? I said, oh, so you can walk to a ringing telephone but never be able to answer it? I mean, come on, that's weird. I'm a surgeon, you know, I want hands. I want to be able to do things. I'd rather be able to push a wheelchair and not be able to walk. I mean, that makes more sense to me. So her response was, well, we'll just pray that you have hands. And I'm like, Renee, your spinal cord, you know, I'm going through the whole physiology. And she's like, no, we'll just pray that you have hands. So she arranged another prayer day a couple of weeks later. That day passed and nothing happened. And I probably wasn't too surprised. But the next morning I woke up, and they used to put towel rolls in my fingers so that my fingers would stay curled. And I looked down at my right hand and wiggled my right index finger. That's before I had biceps, before I had triceps, before I had wrist extension. So when my wife came to the hospital that day, I said, hey, watch this. You know what she said? See? So now you know, I have to credit her faith with pushing things forward. Because if it was me and the medical person, I wouldn't have believed it. But it happened. Well, things started moving along, and obviously, this is me accomplishing my first goal of driving the power wheelchair with one arm. And I'm proud to tell you this is the only day I spent in my power wheelchair, because once I accomplished this goal, then I said, okay, I need a new goal. I can't just stay with this. So give me a manual chair so I can start trying to push the manual chair. And things really started to move along, and it was pretty exciting. I was actually getting to the point where I could do a little bit of shuffling of a walk and maybe even grip some things, and it was pretty exciting. And you know, that I started having all this numbness and nerve pain, which wasn't fun and was problematic. But I also was trying to learn to be independent again. And this is a picture of me with my occupational therapist, Val. As you can see, she's a redhead, and she lived up to her reputation as a redhead. She was very determined that I was going to be able to take care of myself. And as you can see in this picture, she's having me feed myself with this weird fork. Okay? Now, think about this. You have someone with terrible motor skills and even poor sensory skills, and you give them a sharp object and no eye protection. I mean, really? You're like, whoa. I'm lucky I made it out of the hospital with both eyes intact. But I did. Now, I do have to tell you a story. This is one of those stories that if I hadn't have been there, I wouldn't have believed it. So Val was very focused that I was going to be able to put on my shirt on my own and get dressed. Now keep in mind what I told you, that it took a long time before I had biceps, which means even getting your hand up to your chin or your face, that was a big deal. But it was even longer before I had triceps. So I could get my hand up here, but I had to have somebody else move it back. Okay? So putting on a shirt, that's huge. I mean, you don't ever think about it, but what do you have to do to put on a shirt? So on a regular basis, Val would come in the hospital room. She would set me up in the hospital bed. She'd throw the shirt on my abdomen, and I'd have to put my arms through, grab the bottom of the shirt, and then try and put the stupid shirt up over my head. Big deal. I kept getting closer, but could never quite get it all the way up over my head. So on a particular Monday morning, Val walks in the room, throws the shirt on my abdomen. She has an OT student with her, so she's bound and determined to show this student what can be done. And she points at me and she says, today is the day. So I'm like, so I get my arms through, reach down. Sure enough, I get this shirt over my head. Now we're talking, right? I've got this shirt over my head. So I get the neck lined up, But now I'm like the little kid. I'm under the shirt. I'm like battling, I'm fighting, it's hot, I can't breathe, and I'm really struggling, and they're not helping me one bit. In fact, it's even worse, they start laughing. So I stop and say, Val, what is the deal? And in this very nice voice, Val says, Dr. Hull, do you realize what this looks like? And then together they start saying, push, Dr. Hull, push, 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 breathe, 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 push, 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 push. Because my head is crowning through the top of this shirt. I am not amused 1 second. So I start saying, just get scissors, cut it, I don't care, just get it out, I want it out. So I'm here to tell you what goes around comes around, right? And any problem I have now are the low APGAR scores I had at my second birth when I came through that shirt. So again, that's like, if I hadn't have been there, I think I was making that story up. So, well, like I told you, things were going along well, but then I started having all this awful nerve pain, and they did an MRI, and they said, oh, you have a bubble in your spinal cord. We think that's the problem. Let's take you back to surgery. They did. And they went all the way down to my spinal cord, tried to get rid of this bubble, couldn't get rid of it, ended up with a bad abscess in my neck, had to have that incised, and spent 6 months on IV antibiotics because they thought I had a bone infection of my neck. That's the only time I was very frightened, because I thought if I have methicillin-resistant staph in my cervical spine, toast, right? So eventually I went home after 3.5 months in the hospital. This is me with my hospital records, all 5 volumes. Why am I smiling, those of you in the medical profession? Because I didn't have to dictate one stinking page of that chart. Yes. Okay. So now I'm home, and I don't have any outpatient benefits, but I have home health care benefits. So I'm getting my therapy at home. So I have a PT coming to my house and an OT coming to my house. And I'm a little frustrated by that, because they just want to change my environment. They want to change my door handles and all that sort of thing, and that's fine, but I felt like, gee, give me a shot. Well, my physical therapist went on vacation, and a physical therapist by the name of Jan Black filled in. The first day that we were together was awful. The second day, though, was huge, because I realized very quickly that she was the key to help me get where I wanted to go. So eventually I convinced my insurance company to pay her PT and OT hours to give me what I wanted and what I needed. So together, we set out where we worked together for about 2.5 years, literally 4 to 6 hours a day doing rehab, because of all the potential and all the progress I could make. This is actually me in my house, just trying to learn how to get up off the floor. But she was really the key, because of her incredible knowledge and her keen observations, and also her belief that things really could get better. So now to kind of bring you back to the timeline. So I was injured in 1999. It's now 2001. Okay, this picture was taken in 2001, and you can see I've made extraordinary progress. I'm walking with 2 arm crutches. I actually do have some individual finger function at this point, and I'm really making good progress. But I realize I need a new goal. I need something to help me move down the road. I find out that the Salt Lake Organizing Committee for the Winter Olympics in 2002 are going to let ordinary citizens carry the Olympic torch. The light bulb goes on, and I say, that's it, I want to be a torchbearer. But I don't want to be a torchbearer with a wheelchair or a cane or a crutch. I want to be a torchbearer, carry it in my own hands and walk. And if I can, I want to run. Remember what I just told you about my hands being partially numb and things disappear? So now you're talking about me carrying a 3.5-pound Olympic torch with gloves on in the cold? I mean, I don't want to be the guy who drops the torch on TV. I just as soon light my hair on fire as to do that. But that's a huge challenge. Well, you had to be nominated to be a torchbearer. I nominated myself. I had everybody I knew nominate me. I campaigned to be a torchbearer. And I found out in July of 2001 that I would be a torchbearer for the following February of 2002. The nice thing is I had a physical therapist who believed in me. And my goal became, Jan's goal became our goal. And so together we set out on this plan to try and accomplish that. So I started to train. Specifically, I actually would go to a public pool and I would actually practice walking in the water, and the buoyancy helped. I even practiced running in the pool with the idea that just maybe I could run a little bit. I was watching TV one night, and on PBS, I saw an experimental harness down at UCLA. And the harness was used for people with spinal cord injuries. And the harness functioned by removing body weight through ropes and pulleys. Well, that harness system was $50,000. When Jan showed up the next day, I said, you know what? We need to take advantage of this technology. Well, I couldn't go to UCLA. I didn't have $50,000. This is my $250 Home Depot version that you're now seeing that I rigged up in my house. That's a safety harness with ropes and pulleys and cleats on the wall. We would put the stage of the treadmill up. I would stand on a bathroom scale and weigh myself. Then I would get in the harness and put the treadmill back down, and I would practice walking on the treadmill. And do that several times a week. I found out over the internet the weight and length of the Olympic torch. I didn't have an Olympic torch, so I requisitioned one of my son's baseball bats, hooked an ankle weight to it, and that was my pseudo torch. I knew I'd have to walk 0.2 of a mile. So on a regular basis, I would go to the high school track with my pseudo torch and walk once around the track. And I would practice how to change hands and what it would feel like. And as it got colder, I started wearing gloves. And there were a lot of people at the track who were kind of a little bit wary of this guy with the baseball bat who couldn't walk quite so well. In fact, I'm surprised I never got asked to use a breathalyzer at times. But nevertheless, this was my way of preparing. And about 2 weeks before my turn, a friend of mine who had carried the torch in Texas actually loaned me her real Olympic torch so that I was adequately prepared for my moment, for my 15 minutes of flame. So on February 8th, 2002, the last day of the Olympic torch relay, as the flame is heading back toward the Olympic Stadium in Salt Lake City, I had my opportunity to be an Olympic torchbearer. And I'm going to tell you that this was a surreal moment because it's the only time when you are the torchbearer that you are carrying a symbol that is universally recognized by all humankind in the same way. I had never thought about that. But there is another symbol in the world that we all recognize in the same way. If you think about it. The cross, the Star of David, the swastika, I mean anything, any symbol you think about, but we all look at the Olympic flame and we all agree what it is. And even more than that was I was privileged to carry the Olympic flame in front of hundreds of people who had come just to see me that day. It was amazing, just a very amazing opportunity. Now, to make the story even more Disney-like, I ended up passing the Olympic flame to Karl Malone of the Utah Jazz. And there's a whole funny story with that. And I have to tell you really quickly, because again, it's one of those, if I hadn't have been there, I wouldn't have believed it. Some of you may remember, and if you don't, let me refresh your memory. When they made the announcement of the Olympic torch relay, Karl Malone was being interviewed, and the reporter said, "So what would you do if you know, would you like to carry the torch?" And Karl, being Karl, said, "I won't carry it somewhere insignificant like in the desert. I'll only carry it into the Olympic Stadium." Which unleashed this firestorm of public opinion like, "You arrogant horses, so-and-so, you know, it's a privilege to carry the torch, and yet you still want to carry it somewhere special." It's not good enough just to carry it. You have to carry it someone special. It was so bad that they actually took his name off of the list of potential torchbearers. I don't know if you knew that. I mean, the Olympic Committee said, okay, you're done. We're not giving you the chance. Okay, so now fast forward to me. I found out I'm going to be a torchbearer. There were people who actually said to me, so what do you think about Carl and the torch? And I said, well, he's a jerk and he doesn't deserve to carry it. And believe it or not, 2 people said to me, what would you do if you had to pass the flame to Carl? Well, first of all, I'm thinking he's not going to get it. Second of all, even if he does get it, who's going to give it to him? Stockton to Malone, right? We all know that. Duh, right? It's not going to be Holden Malone. So what's the chance of that going to happen? So I said I would just keep running. I mean, I wouldn't even give him. All right, so now I'm set up. So I show up the day of the relay. I'm sitting in my car. The supervisor walks up and he introduces himself. Yeah, how you doing? Hey, would you like to know who you're going to pass the flame to? Yeah, Carl Malone. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, pretty funny. He goes, no, really. And he turns around the clipboard, and sure enough, Carl is who I'm going to pass the flame to, which I should have known something was up because 48 hours prior to that time, they called me and said, we're moving you back 1 segment. I'm like, no, you can't do that because all these people are coming. They said, no, we're moving you back. So now I have about 15 minutes to figure out what I'm going to do with this Carl Malone problem, right? Because my first thought is, good. I'm going to get up there and tell him what a horse's butt he is, and we'll just take care of it right now. And if he slugs me, look at the witnesses. I mean, this is going to be a great court case, right? Slam dunk, no problem. But somehow that just didn't feel right to me. So I'm riding on the shuttle bus. They take you and they drop you off at your little station. And I'm thinking, man, what? I don't know what to do. So I have to tell you, I did. I finally just said a prayer and said, you know what? You're going to have to help me with this one because I'm out of options. And as soon as I said the prayer, some words came to my mind. I'm like, all righty. Okay, thanks. They're good words, I want you to know. You would hope, right? And so when I got up to Carl, I motioned for him to bend down, and I whispered the words that had come to me into his ear. I won't tell you what they are, because if he ever wants to share them, he can. They're for him. And he looked a little surprised, I can tell you. And he stood back up, and I said, are you ready? And he said, yeah, and I lit his torch, and away he went. And I'm glad I took the high road. I'm very happy about that. Now, there is a little bit of justice in the world, and here's why. Remember I told you I got moved back 1 segment? Well, so Carl was carrying the flame where I was supposed to originally carry the flame. And people who were there that day told me there wasn't cheering, there wasn't booing, there was this strange hush that came over the crowd, and as Carl started moving down the road, the crowd started to go the opposite direction to see me. So he had this really kind of Twilight Zone experience of just being ignored. Something he's not very accustomed to being. When I found out about that, I actually wrote him a letter and explained. I said, you may have had this unusual experience. Let me tell you why. And I sent him a couple of pictures of me and him exchanging the torch. I asked him to autograph one, which he did, but the other one I autographed to him. So I'm probably the only person who's ever sent an autographed picture to Carl Malone. So that was the Carl Malone story. Now, this picture shows you, this picture I want you to think about, this is my George Bailey, Allah, It's a Wonderful Life moment. Because I will never again be surrounded with so many people who are there just for me with so much joy and happiness. This is immediately after I finished carrying the Olympic flame. And it was amazing. It was just unbelievable to have all those people there. This is actually the picture that I sent to Carl, autographed, and he sent back to me. But let me quickly put this in perspective for you. If you think about this, if 2+ years prior to this moment, someone had walked into my hospital room and said, "Hey, look, I know things look really bad. Me, you're totally paralyzed from the neck down. You've literally lost everything. But in a little over 2 years, you're going to walk down the middle of 7th East in Salt Lake City under your own power without any kind of assistive device. You're going to carry a 3.5-pound Olympic torch with your own hands, with the gloves on, in the cold. You're going to be surrounded by hundreds of people who are there to see you. And at the end of that, you're going to pass the Olympic flame to someone very well known." I would have looked at them and said, "That will take a miracle." I don't know why I am so blessed. I just know that it happened. And it's amazing that it did. Now, you have all these blessings. I mean, I'm incredibly blessed. So now what do I do? This is the way my life felt. Just a blank screen. I'm literally a little bit lost now because I'm not sure what to do. Well, the interesting thing was, as you can imagine, as I was going through my rehab, people would call me to go see their friends and family who had been injured. Because I'm a doctor and had this injury, never mind the fact that I'm an OB, I mean, that was a little bit of a problem, but they would say, "Would you go see my friend?" And I would have this experience because I would walk into their hospital room and the people would go, "You're walking." "Yes." "Where did you get into rehab?" "My house," which was a little awkward. "Well, we want what you had." Okay. And people were calling Jan Black, my therapist, saying, "We'll pay you. We want therapy." Well, we quickly realized that there was a huge need that wasn't being fulfilled in our community. The people wanted more, they needed more, but it just wasn't available. Well, in another made-for-TV moment, I'm reading on the internet, literally one day, and I ran across this quote, which has been attributed to Gandhi. "You must be the change you want to see in the world." And I can honestly tell you, it was one of those moments when I went, "Are you kidding me?" Because I knew what it meant. So Jan and I finally said, "Okay, well, if we're going to do it, how are we going to do it?" So we actually got with Dustin and Nettie and started writing a business plan and said, "This is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it different. We're going to give people what they need and make it work." So 10 years ago, we opened up a clinic in an empty 1,000-square-foot room. We have a blue mat, a pair of hand weights, a red therapy ball, and a milk crate as our filing cabinet. And it was just Jan and myself, and we rented some time in some hydrotherapy pools and said, "Okay, we're a spinal cord injury recovery center." Confidence is what you have before you know what in the heck you're doing. And that's what we set out to do. So 10 years later, we have 4,000 square feet. We have a staff of 14, and we've been able to make it work. We give people an extraordinary amount of time. Even though we bill their insurance, we're a nonprofit, we give people twice as much time. We have to go out and raise the money to make that work. But by doing it that way, people make progress. And when they make progress, they become more independent, more functional, more neurological recovery, better health. And they have hope, and they actually, you see them start to make progress in all sorts of ways. You remember my $250 Home Depot version? Harness? This is now the real $85,000 harness system that we have in our facility, and our clinicians have become exceptionally skilled in a process called body weight supported locomotor training, where they actually trigger a stepping response by touching the legs in the right time at the right moment to actually get a stepping response. And the interesting thing is, we now spend a week every year with the neuroscientist who's behind this, that I saw on that TV program 15 years ago. We also have invested in special aquatic therapy pools that have integrated treadmills in the floor, video cameras to see under the water, and water jets, so that we have an incredible tool to help our therapists get people to back as much as possible. In 2010, we were very honored because the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation came to us and said, we want you to be part of what we call the Neuro Recovery Network. And so we're one of 6 facilities in the U.S. designated as a community fitness and wellness facility. But where we're most honored is they ask us, we didn't pursue them. And so we take that as a huge compliment. And a year and a half ago, we were able to get the Sorensen Legacy Foundation to bring this incredible Lokomat equipment to the West for the first time. This is a $350,000 piece of robotic ambulation that is software driven. The next closest one is in Denver or LA, so we're incredibly fortunate to have this. And we also started a pediatric program about a year and a half ago, and one of the things we didn't realize is the enormous need in our community for neuro rehab for kids. We're working with a pediatric physical therapist, a physiatrist. And when we got the funding for the Lokomat, I called her and said, hey, I need to start scheduling this. How many kids do you think we're going to see in the next 6 months? She said, Dale, I can send you 30 tomorrow. And so one of the things that we were able to do is we have the smaller legs for the pediatric Lokomat. So we can put kids as young as 2 years of age on the Lokomat. This little girl that you see right now, she's a 6-year-old girl from Morocco. She was in a car accident on Christmas Eve, and she's a T9 paraplegic. Was sent to a hospital in France, was there for 2 weeks, and they really did very little for her. And her mother and her father brought her to the U.S., and they've been working at NeuroWorks since mid-February. She's now walking with a walker. But she's stolen everybody's hearts. That's the problem. The other thing I wanted to show you, speaking of the famous business plan, this is the business plan that Eddie and Dustin put together for us. It was originally called J&D Rehab. That was before we actually figured out the NeuroWorks name. So we're very grateful for them. Now, so what's next? Well, on August 27th, just this couple weeks ago, we broke ground for a new 25,000 square foot facility that will be in Sandy, Utah. We're currently in South Jordan, Utah. And Workers' Compensation Fund is helping to build this building for us. The Sorensens have contributed, and the Larry and Gail H. Miller Family Foundation have also contributed. So you'll see some renderings. This is our land therapy area. We'll have an overhead bodyweight support system. This is our neuroaquatic center that the Sorensen Legacy Foundation has funded. And we also have a full-size collegiate or a high school-sized basketball court that the Larry and Gail H. Miller Family Foundation has contributed $500,000 to help build, which is why we had to put the Utah Jazz logo on there. And Jan and I kick ourselves because when we were at the meeting, they said, we're going to ask you to put the Jazz logo on the floor. And we just didn't think fast enough because we should have said, well, you know, the Clippers are offering $750,000. but they're incredibly generous, and we're very appreciative. So we also sponsor wheelchair basketball, quad rugby, and other adaptive sports. It'll also have a patio area for socialization, but it's also an outdoor skills area. So we're incredibly enthused and very excited to get this underway. And we hope in the next week or two that we'll actually be moving dirt, and that we'll be in by next June. But it'll really be, our aspiration is to be the premier neuro rehab facility on the outpatient side as we can. So what is this all about? It's really about people. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have a building, it's nice to have equipment, but this is about people. It's about people whose lives have been devastated by a condition that they had no choice in. A brain injury, a stroke, a spinal cord injury. It's about having people who need some degree of hope, and they need a plan. Most of us get by if we have hope and a plan. If you have hope but no plan, you just kind of sit and make yourself feel better. If you have a plan but no hope, why execute? But if you have hope and a plan, you can now move forward with confidence, knowing that you're going to get somewhere, which is really what we're trying to provide. And I can tell you that my life has been blessed because the people we meet are the most incredible people in the world. They're unbelievable because they work so dang hard and they want to be there. Now, just quickly, I'm still asked, are you still making progress? And here's what I can tell you. In 2009, I wanted to celebrate my 10-year anniversary from my accident. And I used to run in our pools because I can run in the water, but I can't run on land. So I used to run in the pools for my workout. So I decided to see how far I could run. So I trained for 4 months. And then I ran a full marathon in the pool in 5 hours and 56 minutes. So I did 26.2 miles. And my strangest claim to fame is that I actually made it into Runner's World magazine as a quadriplegic running an underwater marathon. Now, people can say, well, that's not progress. I would have said, if 5 years prior to this time, someone would have said, you're going to run an underwater marathon, I'd have said, yeah, and Obama will be president. So I consider it progress. And then a few years ago, I went skydiving with my 18-year-old son. I call this progress. My wife calls it regress, but nevertheless, I did it. And then, as Dustin mentioned, I went back to school and got my Master's of Public Administration degree to help me run the nonprofit better. So let me just share a couple of other thoughts really quick, because I know I'm between you and dinner. I have learned so much in the last 15 years that, given the opportunity to go back, or let me say it a different way, if Dustin or God or Buddha or Allah or Bill Gates could walk up right now and say, I'm going to touch you, and when I touch you, you'll be made completely whole, but you have to forget everything you learned, I would say, don't touch me. Which surprises me every time I say that, because I really miss my body. I miss it every day. But the value of the journey is so incredibly rich that I really couldn't. Now, if I could be made whole and remember, that would be sweet. The other thing I've come to realize is that we all are paralyzed at some point in our life. Mine just happened to be physical paralysis. But you may be paralyzed by fear. You may be paralyzed by grief, may be paralyzed by abuse, by addiction, by prejudice, by something. Because paralysis just means an absence of movement and feeling. And overcoming those forms of paralysis really is part of the journey that allows you to grow and become a more deeper and important human being. It's what gives us depth, even though it's incredibly hard. I don't know, again, why I've been so blessed. I just know that I have. I hope that whatever adversity you face, you're as blessed as I am. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here, and good luck, and God bless.
Wonderful job. Can I see if they have any questions for you?
Sure. Thank you.
I'm sure as I have been involved and touched by his story, what a remarkable journey, and thank you for sharing that with us. But before he goes, I've asked if he'd take some questions. Are there any questions that you have, Bill, before he goes? And you're welcome to have dinner with us.
Wow, great.
Steak dinner.
Perfect.
Any questions?
What's your next goal?
My next goal, I think, is just what I told you, is that our aspiration is that we want to be what Huntsman is to cancer, what Moran is to eye care. We want to be to outpatient spinal cord injury. Personally, I know that I need to be an advocate for the patients who have these injuries. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to be a better advocate, whether or not that means that I write more or speak more or whatever it is, because I think there's more that we can do to help these individuals.
Grandma.
I was wondering, women are always curious, just how old are you?
Well, I don't know what you have in mind. I just turned 60 on Friday. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Were you ever at a point where the despair of the situation borderline overcoming you?
Yes, and I'll even be more blunt. Did I ever consider suicide? Yes. And my personal feeling is that and we deal with this all the time because we see people are discharged from the hospital so early now that we're seeing them 8 weeks after a major spinal cord injury. And unfortunately, we don't have a social worker at our clinic. I end up doing some of that, and the therapists do also. But here's my feeling, is I don't think you're normal unless you explore every boundary that is in front of you in that regard. In other words, your life is so totally turned upside down that I think you have to say, where are my boundaries? What are my choices? And so I explored that and said, do I really want to live like this? Do I want to stay like this? Is suicide an option? And eventually I came to the conclusion, no, that's not an option. But I think you have to go there because you need to know how to get different. And like I told you, I didn't know how to get different. And that's what's really troubling. And so, when you see these individuals and they come and they want to talk about that, I don't shy away from that. The one thing I do say to those people is I say, I'll tell you what, if you'll give it a year, and if you still feel the same in 1 year, then I'll hook you up with people who will help make that happen. Because people need to go through the journey. I can't take the journey for them. Everybody has to go through the storm because there's value in the journey. We always focus on the destination. If I get here, it's the journey that changes us. And so I just try and help them go through the journey.
So you talk about your wife's faith. When you were in your low points, what would you say brought you through that?
There's no question that I could feel the prayers of so many people. There's no question that there was divine intervention on my behalf. And like I said, I think you can't underestimate just the incredible love that people genuinely have. The human spirit, their concern, their care, their prayers, their love. You feel that. So if you ever doubt, there's just me saying a prayer for this person, never question. I don't know what kind of religious group this is. I'm gonna go out a little bit on a limb here, which I've never really shared. But there was a point in time when I believe I was allowed to see the prayers ascending on my behalf. And the closest I can tell you is, when you stand by a freeway and the cars are going by, and you recognize the enormous power and energy that a 4,000-pound vehicle at 70 miles an hour is pushing. You just feel that, right? That's pretty much what I felt. And I recognized that when you get a bunch of petitions that arrive at heaven, if that's what you want to say, they have to do something with that. It's life force, it's energy, and they can't just say, oh, we're going to ignore that. It's real, and it makes a difference.
Dale, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Are you all rigged up here?
Victor, thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. Shall I